Warner takes.
ArizonaSports.com presents Kurt, a retrospective video series.
What a throw by Warner.
Most memorable games.
I think Kurt Warner, the best game he ever played as a Cardinal and an NFL player, one of the best quarterback games I've ever seen, was his second to last game in the league, the divisional playoff game against Green Bay that went to overtime. Aaron Rodgers was doing magical things on the other side. That was the best quarterback game I ever saw, and Kurt Warner was on top of his game at that point. But my favorite Kurt Warner moment came the year before when the Cardinals beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game. And it took a long time for that to sink in, but one of the things that helped it sink in for a long-time suffering Cardinals fan like me was his Shock the World speech on the podium at University of Phoenix Stadium. That's when it kind of became a reality that, wow, this team is actually going to the Super Bowl in 2 weeks. It was surreal for anybody that was there, anybody that had followed the team for a long time. So that was my favorite Kurt Warner moment, and kind of the moment that crystallized just how much he meant to that organization.
You know, if you want most memorable and Kurt Warner, you got to go with a playoff win against Green Bay. I mean, come on. More touchdowns than incompletions. You outdueled Aaron Rodgers. That game and that win's only going to look better as time passes. And it's interesting because it wasn't much later where we realized the real takeaway from that game was after the game. When Kurt did the victory lap around University of Phoenix Stadium and went high five with all the members of the Red Sea, only a few weeks later we realized that was Kurt saying goodbye.
Well, the most memorable play for me, I think, will always be the touchdown to Larry Fitzgerald with about 2.5 minutes to go in the Super Bowl. And we all remember Fitz streaking through the defense, and we all remember how wide open he was and how the Red Sea just kind of seemed to part for him and as he ran down the middle of the field. And I remember at the time thinking, especially when that game ended, and unfortunately it ended the way that it did, that the Cardinals could do everything right for the next 10 years and still not get this close to their dreams. And they did do a lot of things right since then. Not initially, but since they have. And when I think about that moment, when I think about how close the Cardinals came and how hard it is to get back to that moment, I always think of Kurt Warner, and I'm appreciative of the fact that he got the Cardinals to that point, because without him, there is no touchdown pass to Larry Fitzgerald. There is no lead in the Super Bowl with 2.5 minutes to go. And he's just as responsible for that as Fitz was. And I think of that moment quite a bit.
It was a 2009 postseason, Cardinals-Packers, the wild card round at University of Phoenix Stadium in Glendale, and Kurt Warner threw 5 touchdown passes and just 4 incomplete passes against the Packers in a 51-45 Cardinals overtime win. What's really funny about that game, besides the fact that Kurt Warner went bananas, was I'm pretty sure one of his touchdown passes, the second one to Larry Fitzgerald, he was actually trying to throw the ball away, and he still ended up throwing a touchdown pass. And a game like that, it was Kurt Warner's final home game for the Cardinals. He was as good as he's ever been, and the Cardinals needed every bit of his performance to make it to the next round. So when you're looking at Kurt Warner and what he did with the Cardinals and for some of the best plays, best games, I don't think you can look anywhere else other than that playoff game against the Green Bay Packers.
My favorite, or I guess most memorable game of watching Kurt Warner, it isn't the Super Bowl, although that was unbelievable. It isn't even the playoff run to the Super Bowl, and I have no fault if that's yours. It's another playoff game as a Cardinal when they took on the Green Bay Packers. We were still wondering if Aaron Rodgers could win the big game. I know that sounds dumb now, but Aaron Rodgers had established himself as a good starting quarterback, but hadn't won the big game yet. And he takes on Kurt Warner, and Kurt Warner throws more touchdown passes than incompletions. I mean, just think about a quarterback that's not that mobile, like Kurt Warner. You're going to have to throw the ball away sometimes to avoid the sack, and that usually adds to your incompletions total. Kurt Warner was so on fire that he didn't have that trouble. More touchdown passes than incompletions. And this is off the top of my head, but he had like 36 attempts in that game. Was incredible. That, to me, is one of the greatest playoff performances by any quarterback, and it just happened to be an Arizona Cardinal.
You know, it's a shame, but the game that stands out for me is the New Orleans game in which he took such a pounding, because that's the game that I think and I believe forced him into retirement. I think he would have came back if he didn't take such a beating in that New Orleans game. There's so many great memories, like the Steelers Super Bowl, like the Green Bay game in the playoffs, like the Eagles game in the playoffs. But the New Orleans game, the year after the Super Bowl, when they lost, we all thought Kurt Warner was going to come back and play another year, and he decided to retire. And I still believe that it's because of that New Orleans game and the beating that the Saints put on him as the reason as to why he decided to walk away from the game.
The most memorable game for Kurt Warner was the 2009 wild card playoff game against the Green Bay Packers, where he had more touchdowns than incompletions in the game. You talk about being on fire. There was nobody playing the position any better than Kurt Warner was that day. And I, again, was a beneficiary because I was on the team. I benefited directly from all of those fantastic plays that he was able to manufacture during that game. It seemed as if everything that he did turned to gold. He had a magical performance, and he was what we call in the zone. And very few quarterbacks get to experience that, but I saw Kurt do it on a number of occasions, but he was especially on fire that day against the Packers.